deployed. My question is, are your audience following you? Are they able to retune their frequencies? And where you've changed to different satellites, where your footprints may be different, have you lost audiences because of those measures?
Can I ask Ibrahim to postpone his answer, and can I ask you to move on to the fascinating issue about how you, the BBC World Service, tackle this?
So the first thing I wanted to say is, Alistair's right, this is a historic problem. We're talking specifically about satellite jamming, which is of interest to all of us, but it's always been done. It was done when the only way for broadcasters to communicate internationally was by shortwave radio. It's been done to satellites, and it's now being done with internet. And it may be interesting that we're actually on all of those platforms at the moment, reaching our international audiences. And I think it's fair to say that at the moment, somewhere in the world, on all of those platforms, we're being jammed or blocked now at the moment. So this isn't something that's gone away. It doesn't matter what technology it is. And as Ibrahim said, it could be a political reason, it could be a commercial reason. This is about the vulnerability of those platforms. And specifically to do with the satellite jamming, we haven't actually been, I think I'm right in saying that the BBC Arabic service hasn't directly been targeted in the MENA region, but we have suffered from the jamming in that region by what we call, because we've shared transponders with other services that have been targeted. And Adnan mentioned that, and what we're talking about here is uplink jamming, where a particular content may be targeted, but the impact is much bigger than that, because all of the other services that share that transponder on the satellite are knocked out. And you're also talking about perhaps an individual country saying, oh, I don't like that broadcaster, I don't like that content, so I don't want it to come within my country's borders. But when they do this uplink jamming, it takes out the whole footprint. So that takes out that country, adjacent countries, the whole, sometimes a region. And that is what makes that specific type of jamming contrary to international regulations. Because you're not just denying, it's in terms of, internationally, in terms of whether it's considered right or wrong. There's the issue of national sovereignty, so a country will always retain the right to prevent what they consider to be destabilising information to come within its borders. I mean, and there's a whole argument around that, but that is a reality of our world. But when you talk about that type of jamming, you're not just denying a service to your own people, you're denying a service to other people, and you're also denying other services as well.
I think BBC was targeted by Iran.
We have, and in that instance, it was very difficult for us initially to try and address that. We did the same as Al Jazeera. You look at moving to different transponders. You look at moving to different satellites. The difficulty there is that sometimes your audience is on a particular satellite. So, you know, the satellite operator may say to you, "Yes, move over to this one. This will be okay." But actually, our audiences aren't tuned to that satellite. So that's the problem for broadcasters. And broadcasters are often told by operators or service providers, well, it's your content that's a problem. So, you know, can you change it? Or, you know, or actually there's nothing we can do because, as has been said, the satellites are vulnerable and it can be very easy to do. So initially, that's the kind of response that we got. And as well as doing all the things that were technically available to us, we considered that actually we needed to start to raise the profile of the issue. And that's why we put on the International Broadcasting Without Borders Day in 2012. And the idea of that was to open a debate. We're a broadcaster, we can do that, we can bring people together, we can talk about our experience. We considered that it was important not necessarily to talk about specific examples, because as we've heard, there's a historical aspect to this. And we brought together people from the industry, broadcasters, any interested stakeholders. We had MPs, we had people from the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, and we started a debate. And our feeling is that you need to operate on 3 different levels. Specifically with satellite jamming, this may actually be applicable to the internet as well. You have to look at technical solutions and you have to work with the industry. And I think, Ibrahim, I mean, I would say that the operators and the equipment manufacturers are actually, I mean, they may have been doing this anyway, but there are some very interesting things happening now within the industry. They're looking at technical mitigation. And they were really pleased that they were initially very concerned that we were raising the profile, because no one likes to consider that they're vulnerable. But there are interesting things going on technically. Broadcasters are communicating. That's how I met Ibrahim. We talk about our situation, how we're being hit, what we're doing to get over that. That dialogue is really important. The regulatory aspect is very important. These instances that there is an international procedure whereby you can complain about this interference. I think it's important to do that. You must get evidence, as Ibrahim said. That is very difficult. It's very difficult to get evidence, but you know, it's very important that these instances are properly recorded and sent to the ITU. And then the third thing is the political aspect. We need to appreciate why this is happening. We need to try and find a way to talk about it that doesn't just end up having people talking. End up with people not wanting to talk to each other because of the political aspect. We need to find common ground. We need to look at this as a technical problem, and we need to find solutions. But we need to find solutions looking at all those different aspects.
Thank you very much. Can I kindly bring back the microphones? Yes, if you can introduce yourself and your organisation, please.
Thank you. I'm Abdullah Khalid from the Equality Foundation. 2 questions really. One to الحوار والجزيرة. Have you come across any jammers based in the UK? And if so, what is the law in terms of them jamming other companies? And linked to that is another question, which is, have you ever come across any other media stations or outlets that try to jam you, الحوار والجزيرة? And finally, about Manar TV station. It seems during wartime...
Sorry, which? Al-Manar, which is the pro-Hezbollah. Yes, okay, in Lebanon.
Even during wartime, the bomb smithereens, they still have to be broadcasting effectively. They never go out of broadcast range. How is that possible? How do they compare with, say, Al Jazeera?
Thank you. Any other question before I come back to the panel? Okay, I'd like to add to the mix a couple of questions to Adnan and to Alistair. Adnan, if you can add to Abdullah's question, from a technical point of view, how quickly can you as a TV station, can you detect and identify interference and then move to resume broadcast? I mean, what's the time lapse between the detection to the resumption of broadcast? And Alistair, if I may, I'm intrigued by what Kath said and the day that you held on the freedom of broadcasting, international broadcasting without borders. I mean, in light of the kind of globalization that we have, and globalized world community that we have, is there a move, or shouldn't there be a move, if there isn't, towards establishing some sort of international charter that protects, the freedoms of international broadcasters and, countries to receive broadcast from whatever. So I'll come to you, but I'll move from left to right. So Ibrahim, first of all.
Yeah. Actually, for the question from Keith regarding loss of audiences, of course, yes, we will lose audiences, and the point that those guys interfering is usually play on targeting famous historic frequencies. So when they target those frequencies, they are sure that those will be impacting losing of audiences, trying to create the biggest damage they can. And of course, unfortunately, to say that for a certain extent, they can. You know, with those new frequencies, safe frequencies, if you want to say, we launching campaigns on different platforms: Facebook, Twitter's, scroll bars, broadcasting promos, and news press releases, and the news journalists in most of Arab countries. We are doing a big campaign to promote those frequencies. We launch a website that helps the audiences how to tune to new frequencies. They receive emails, SMSs from us. The most important point here is to mitigate those. There is some preventive and there is some corrective steps that can help to mitigate interferences, you know. So one of those is to make the awareness to people. And we are doing our best in that aspect.
Regarding Abdullah's question about UK-based jammers, have you ever come across?
You mean to find sources to be from UK? No.
Yeah.
This is the point here. Actually, the geolocation will start from detecting. So we feel that there is jamming because we have the equipment. So we detect. Then we analyze, characterize the interferences to understand the technical nature. Then we geolocate. Now, usually, the next step after geolocation is to arrest. And arresting, of course, if somebody is geolocating, interfering from Europe or America, it's easy to arrest him because there is applied laws there, established procedures. You can file anyone to court, and you take legal actions. But if this country, somewhere in the MENA region, it is out of no way. So here is the point. Yes, we didn't, of course, and identifying those jammers to be a media, or here the point that when we geolocate within a diameter of 2 to 3, sometimes 10 kilometers. It depends on the nature of each time the jamming is happening. So we cannot identify. So after we just geolocate with that, should be as per the procedure that you send a helicopter or something with a special devices to pinpoint, and you can pinpoint which building is originating the interference. But you know, this is not applicable as well in some areas.
Yes, the helicopter will be shot down.
Yeah.
Okay, Adnan.
Yes, thank you, Abdullah. It's a very good question. We've not had any experience at all to have any jamming from UK. And following to what Ibrahim said, it is very hard for any place to be located, especially the areas that we've had jamming from Iran or Syria or Libya or even Egypt. Right now, as you probably all know, in Egypt or in Yemen, there will not be an exact address. They will tell you that you have to go to the house which is next door to the coffee shop, and then 2 streets later, you know, you have to turn right and then left, and then you find something. So really, like things to be able to pinpoint where a jamming is taking place is almost impossible, and the practicality to maybe do anything like Ibrahim said, to do maybe follow it up by law, to have an arrest, or to raise up a legal matter and take it in a court. This is like unheard of in those areas, especially in Iran and Yemen.
What about jamming from other media broadcasters? Does it happen? Do your competition, for instance?
From UK, we've not had anything. What we've had is people who have raised up an issue with Ofcom, because we are broadcasting from UK and we are under the obeyed by the rule of Ofcom. And if they want to cause any problems, they raise up an issue with Ofcom, and they start negotiating something that from that legal side. We probably discussed the legal side in the afternoon. But there was another question, that, how quickly is it for us to find or to know about jamming? We as a television station, we have our provider, the satellite provider. They monitor our signal 24/7, and we were told almost immediately of time of jamming. And 9 out of 10, the providers say that it is related to your content. Please, can you change it? And there were many times they were asking us officially, if you take the signal from Rabaa, we can put you back on air. It was as obvious as that. How quick for us to find out, we always monitor our channel. We know that it's jammed. What happens at the time, the provider would try to bring down all the transponder, raise up the TV channels one at a time, and the one that come up and the jamming restarts, it's normally the channel that is targeted. And that's where we find out normally. There was another question.
In many instances, actually, viewers alert us.
And viewers.
So we receive calls from Morocco, from Algeria, from Libya, from Jordan, from Palestine, telling us, you're lost. We
cannot find you. And that leads us to the other question where we were asked, was there a loss of audience? We've lost a lot of audiences thinking that we no longer exist because they will be viewing us on Arabsat or Nilesat, and we were jammed. So obviously at the time, people at home will not know what the issue is. So we tend to lose certain viewers who will not be able to follow us when we change from one signal to another or from one frequency to another, and that causes a lot of loss in terms of revenue from advertising and sponsorship of programs, and as well as loyal viewers who had us in the first 10 favorites. That's obviously made a big loss from our side.
I mean, it's fascinating, this provision that change your content and we'll reinstate. I'm just thinking about the World Cup again. I mean, how do you change the World Cup? I mean, apart from asking the team to play slightly better, I mean, what? Alistair, international charters. I mean, where does the world stand on this? Where does the United Nations, where does the Charter on Human Rights stand on freedom of international waters?
Well, the basis for protecting freedom of expression at the moment is Article 19, which is part of the UN kind of Charter on Human Rights, and in theory protects the right to say what you want. But it's like a lot of that charter, quite difficult to enforce. And I think to address your specific question, which is, do we need an international charter on satellite jamming? I think we do. I think it would be useful in two dimensions. One is to set a baseline for what is expected, so to be very, very specific on what you can, or no, what you cannot do. I mean, no one can satellite jam. And I think it would be useful on the commercial angle as well. I think that companies are much more likely to adhere to an international norm like that than a kind of a government. But I think we also need to recognise the limitations of international agreements such as that. They are difficult to enforce, even at their most extreme ends. War crimes and that kind of thing. Freedom of expression is kind of slightly lower down the list, and so might be even more difficult to enforce. And actually, there are technical limitations. I mean, it can be difficult to actually ID exactly who you should blame. Abdullah, just to mention one observation. So it's not jamming in the UK, but the Bahrainis have accused UK intelligence of satellite jamming recently. There is an extraordinary amount of misinformation coming out of that country. So the Bahraini government have accused UK intelligence of jamming.
Jamming what? Their TV?
Jamming their state broadcaster. Yeah. Which, I mean, actually, there's a huge military presence in the bobbing away in Manama Harbour. But interesting point.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, I have Dr. Dawood here. I'll take Dr. Dawood and then we'll come back. Yes.
Ibrahim, after the coup in Egypt, Al Jazeera launched a satellite from Cayenne in South America. how soon will this become effective as a solution to the problem that we're trying to mitigate? And the question for Kate at this time also, you mentioned about procedures, international procedures to complain. Can you enlighten us on these?
I'll come with Ibrahim first, and then we'll move to Kaf.
Yeah, for the question regarding the launch of the new satellite, SailSat, this is right, yeah. And this was part, as a result of the interference in the World Cup 2010. Al Jazeera worked closely with satellite operators existing that time, like Arabsat, Eutelsat, and we start working with the new-born satellite company in Qatar, based in Qatar, called the SailSat, where we discuss with them the technical requirements we are looking for, and we agreed on an action plan. They invest on their board based on our requirements, and the solutions is effective. Nobody can interfere to our signal from the Middle East anymore, because the uplinks is done from outside Middle East. So somebody who wants to impose on our signal, he has to go somewhere else, and even if he went there, he needs some sort of investment, not capable, not available to them in the European market. Of course, because there is regulators there, and there is applied laws, and easily they will be caught, sentenced in any courts in Europe or somewhere else. So this was an effective solution. But coming to what we can do as a charter, I think we can do a much. We have to work. We have to realize that we have to put an end for this chaos in the space. I name it chaos in the space, joined by a chaos in the ground. We have to work closely with the United Nations, with the International Telecommunication Unions, and there was initiatives kicked by most of the important bodies like WBU, like ASPO. We work closely with the BBC as one of the broadcasters who really initiate this process, and we really appreciate their efforts in that aspect as well. We have to work as one body, not anymore individuals. We need to form a lobbying lead to action plan, executed, implemented. We need to work with those like the last meeting in October in Tunis. Al Jazeera participate as well, BBC and other Arab states broadcasters, is organized and sponsored by Arab State Broadcasting Union, ASPO, which is part of the Arab states what's called, and they draft an action plan where most of the broadcasters, they contribute to this one. And from those action plans, where we concur with them, is we need to go and blacklist those governments who we, by evidence, provide them a proof that there is interference from their sides, and they didn't take realistic actions to stop it, prevent it. And even those entities, they are responsible. Actually, from the point of that, they are the government in that country. They are responsible to stop any illegal transmissions from their country, because they are the government. So they are in the front of the international community. They are responsible, and they have to be held responsible for that. They have to submit those guys who is interfering for the proper justice, and we can blacklist. Actually, it's at the end, the United Nations has a lot of power they can do, and we believe that this has to be, taken to the next level. We cannot keep it at a low profile for a long time.
Yes,
thank you.
So the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, is a recognised agency of the UN, and they have the radio regulations, which is an international treaty text which is signed up to all the UN member states. And those are the international regulations that govern international telecommunications. So satellite communications is one of those things. There is something called in the ITU called harmful interference, which is not that's not the definition for jamming, for what we talk about sometimes as deliberate interference. It just means any interference that causes a problem to radio communications that are legitimately there. So that could be interference which is generated not deliberately, and indeed interference is a major problem for satellite communications anyway, unintentional interference. So there is a process within the ITU whereby harmful interference to satellites can be, if it's suffered and identified and evidence is provided. There, I think it's
for the non-intentional, for the
it's both. Is probably the best way of saying that. Harmful interference it can be unintentional or intentional. There's no current ITU definition of intentional interference.
This is what we're trying.
Yeah.
This is what we're trying with the ITU to better define the motives, what's called the interference with the political, commercial, deliberate one. This has to be defined. Harmful means in the communications anything can degrade or make disruption to the service. But this can be solved. If it is not intentional technically, it can take some time to be solved, it can be solved. But if there is a persistent interferences, this is what we are suffering from.
So, but the difficulty is that the ITU is a technical organisation. So how do you have a definition within that body of intent? That's the problem.
It's a bit legal, huh?
And that's the problem, and that's the issue of satellite. I think it was called deliberate interference. Was discussed at the last World Radio Conference of the ITU in 2012. And that was one of the difficulties. Was that there were discussions about something that wasn't actually defined within. There was no agreed definition within that body, and it was difficult to see how it could be defined in a technical way. Now there are some thoughts about how that might be possible. Eutelsat have which is one of the big satellite operators, have made some proposals around looking at. I think Ibrahim was mentioning it. If you look at the interference, if it's targeting a particular, if it to do with the timing, to do with, so there may be some way that perhaps it could be considered.
To characterize it, then we define it.
Yeah, but so these are some of the difficulties that where these are some of the difficulties about dealing with intentional, we'll call it intentional or deliberate interference. It is to do with how it's defined. However, there is a process in the ITU for complaint, because it is also what they call harmful interference. So whether it's deliberate or not is not an issue. And again, at the World Radio Conference in 2012, there was an agreement made after very difficult discussions involving all kinds of different countries of all kinds of different, with all kinds of different perspectives, shall we say. There was an agreement reached to make a very minor change in the text of Article 15 around the responsibility. So if you have a situation of harmful interference and it is geolocated and the origin is found, then it is then that responsibility of that country to identify, to find it and to stop it. So that exists already in the ITU. That is part of the radio regulations. The difficulty is how that is applied, and that's where the problem is, because A, it's very difficult to geolocate. B, a country could either have trouble finding it
or deny it for that matter,
legitimately, or say that they can't find it, and who's going to decide? So there was some concern from some countries around this change. they felt that if there were sanctions applied on them, and they just really didn't have the facilities in country to find the interference, but then there were some sanctions applied to them, there were some real concerns about that from some of the less well-off countries. So all of these things, I think, have to be considered in the international debate. I agree with Ibrahim. You know, this is a huge problem. It's not going to go away. For us as broadcasters, it's a huge problem. But the solution is complicated, and we need to have. There are lots of different places that we need to raise the issue, and perhaps we need to talk about it in different ways in different environments, because it can be very controversial.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. In that case, I will move to close this session. My thanks and gratitude go to our panelists for today: Ibrahim Nassar from Al Jazeera, Adnan Fa'ur from Al-Hawar, and Alistair Sloan, who's a journalist and a writer. And my thanks and gratitude also goes to each and every one of you, and particularly those who took part in the discussion. Kath, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And I will hand back to the organizing team to take us through to what I think is going to be a slight break, a lunch break maybe, and then a resumption in about an hour's time. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
I'm interested to know a little bit about the internal processes when you find out that a program has been jammed, and if there's any opportunity to collaborate between the stations to ensure that particular content is made available, maybe in a different format, so it's streamed online, and even if there's any opportunity for collaboration to set up some sort of resource where, you know, anything that is found is still disseminated. And I also wanted to see what the panel thought of the role of local activists and human rights defenders, how they can play into the discussions around advocacy. I think there's a tendency to view external human rights organisations with quite a lot of disdain from some readers in the Middle East. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. Yeah, the role of local human rights defenders might be a way to get around that. So yeah, two questions.
You mean in the Middle East, human rights defenders in the Middle East?
You could have an activist whose role is to flag immediately when something is jammed, and then also to make sure that communities know that they are not getting it for a thing, and direct them to where they can get it.
For the second question, to start with, as I understand, you talk about the capability to detect the interferences, then report it, and then maybe take some actions further, how we can maybe pinpoint from where then the next step to maybe stop it or size it or something like that, yeah?
Yeah, my question is more about how can you make sure the content still arrives in some form? So there's two parts to it. There's the accountability, so can you identify the person who's done it and then take steps to rectify it? But then there's also, you still want the information.
Yeah, but this is why we have to move from from the phase of just monitor, detect, and locate, then make pressure. This is old approach. We have to move to something like monitor, detect, prevent. Now, we cannot prevent jamming. I mean, we cannot prevent interferences. If somebody interfered to your signal, he will supersede the signal for sure. You cannot prevent it. But now we talk about technical solutions that can not allow this guy to supersede your signal, so he cannot access your transponder because he's out of the coverage. So this privilege, it's not available for him. And if you want to do an uplink or interfering, he has to go somewhere outside. And if he went there, of course, he will be geolocated, and then he will be caught guilty. And nobody will, of course, here's the naming and shaming. The concept of naming and shaming, we like it. We implement that for several years. Now, whenever we have interferences, we announce it on our screens, on all mediums, and to make everyone knows what's going on. This is part of our loyalty and commitment to our audiences. They have to know why they cannot see us. And then whenever platforms we can make us available on free of interferences, we announce it and we keep the campaigns running. This is of course will be costing us duplication for frequencies, buying anti-jamming transponders, investing in campaigns and in different countries through newspaper press releases, but we are doing so. We have to keep reaching the guys.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Yusuf?
Thank you. My name is Yusuf, Reuters Journalist Fellow from Oxford University. Now, media censorship by governments obviously will serve the interests of the censored people. And as you said, Ibrahim, technology is evolving. Now, I think there should be plan B to use the internet or social media activists on the ground, because information will still be disseminated. So, do you think that these media outlets who fear that their signals might be jammed, that they should rely heavily on the internet or social media activists on the ground?
We did actually. We are on all platforms. We are on socials, on the streaming services, on satellite, on internet. But the point here, during, for example, the Egyptian crisis, since the start in 2011, 3G and 4G services has been blocked. And if it's not, there is a huge traffic during the crises. Even you cannot use reporting from the field. So there is some constraint on the terrestrial services because still it's under the control of those regimes. They can easily stop it, they can ban it. What we are working now on is strategic relationships with satellite operators. We will go for some advanced technologies, even not available now for commercial, but we will go for it to put our premium channels. We cannot, of course, if we have 10, 20 channels, we cannot offer them all to be safe, secure. But the most premium channels will be safe and secure.
Yes, my name is Mohammed Sudan. I'm the Foreign Relations Secretary of the Freedom and Justice Party in Egypt. I'm really wondering what the football teams in all over the world, they are a fever, and this controller, they could punish any country do something against their goals or against their principles. Why is the satellite, there is not some kind of union or something like this that goes with all the satellites in all over the world, and then if a country, such as, for instance, in Egypt now, doing any kind of violence against or jamming, for instance, why there's kind of a punishment to their journalists or their TV channels or something like this in other countries?
Actually, this question linked to the first question also, we did not answer it, which is the procedure in case you geolocate the guilty guys, like from whatever the countries. Now, the point is that we escalate to satellite operators. Satellite operators, they file this incident through the ICT within the country they based in. Then the ICT file it to ITU. Also, satellite operators, sometimes they can file those incidents to ITU. Now, the talk within ITU is how we can ensure that this escalation is transparent and there is enough evidences that prove that that country is originating the interferences. Because, for example, now we have geolocation report geolocating the interference from Egypt. This one is valid report and we have the evidences. Now, as per the discussion with ITU, there should be another validating entity that can also geolocate to find this one also from Egypt. Or, so during the discussions we have been talking about a consortium of satellite operators working together. This is not yet finalized in the development phase, where all satellite operators, what's called continent-based broadcasting unions, they are working together and they keep their meetings periodically under the ITU umbrella to define the harmful interference, intentional interferences, and they find a way how we can share the databases of all interferences reported from all countries, and it needs some work actually, still not yet finalized.
Since you are negotiating or discussing with the service providers, maybe one of the issues which you should be also looking at it is the contractual aspect between you and them, in the sense that you can build into the contract. Obviously, it will have to be mutually agreed, but maybe one of the things is to actually put pressure on them, that you incorporate in the agreement between you and the service provider some protection, in the sense, for instance, how much they should be resisting government's orders or instructions, how much obligation they should take or undertake to protect the transmission against jamming. While you are obviously working on the technical side, they should also be part of the obligations. This is just like any other service provider. You sign a contract with a plumber to come and do the bathroom. You can put in the contract that he should finish within a certain time, that he should give you some guarantees.
Service level agreement.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So you would have. So I'm suggesting that perhaps you would get some of the people, aside from looking at the technical aspect, to look at actually at the contractual aspect, and see how you can improve, even if it means paying a little more for the service, but actually to identify the areas where, because you have, the service provider is under pressure from a variety of aspects. He's got the commercial side of it, and the shareholders, they've got the governments where they are hosted, they have the satellite people, so all these elements, if you can somehow build in the contract, so that they will have the defense against the government. So when Mubarak says you have to shut down that channel, they would say to him, yes, we will, but we have a contract here which says if we do that, we are going to. I've seen it, for instance, in not on the jamming, but I've seen it here in, there was one of the stations had a service from, they had a channel, and then the provider was going to terminate the contract because there was some, they had some complaint and they wanted to terminate it. They went to court actually on the basis, and because it was a contract, they were not allowed by court to actually terminate the contract.
So where's this, in UK?
In the UK.
Oh, okay, different story.
But I understand, but what I'm saying...
You talk about now a viable solution, but in UK or Europe...
Even in the, as I said, the example is that, for instance, when Mubarak said, so they said, that he said that you must take this channel off. If they have a contract between them and the station, which says that they will be penalized.
Actually, they have. And what happened after what's called, I don't want to go in the naming of what happened in Egypt in July, so because there's a lot of debate about it, and I'm talking technically here. So after the 3rd of July, there is a lot of channels, like 13, 15, they have been banned. They switch off them on the spot. I'm sure there is a contract between them. And in the contracts, you cannot stop me because of, I don't know, I don't pay the fees, or there is some, in the satellite contracts, usually there's some standards related to breach of your misconduct of ethics, like you put some...
You have in any contract that either party can terminate.
You're right, yes, sure.
One of these things.
Yeah.
But basically, this is where you need to tighten it up. To make it more.
I agree with you.
They do not comply. They do not comply. Let me give you an example. Excuse me.
Yeah.
You see, when Mubarak ordered Nilesat to pull the plug, our service provider here was Globecast. And Globecast were very polite and very decent people, and they came to us and said, "We are very sorry, but this is something that came right from the top in Egypt, and there is nothing we can do about it." We could have taken Globecast to court, but they are not the guilty ones. See, that's the problem. The problem is with Nilesat. Nilesat is a government-owned organization in Egypt. Regarding jamming, they have an argument that relieves them of any commitment, because when a transponder is jammed, it affects 12 channels at least. So what the service provider does is to unplug you so as to guarantee the continuation of service for the other channels who are not as guilty as you are because it was my content that caused the jamming. So in this case, no contract can force them to put me back so long as the jamming is there, because they are not. The argument is that they are not the source of the jamming. It's somebody else who is jamming.
Yeah. Actually, the point by Mr. Sabah is valid. I concur with. We have to work on that. But most of the time, the contracts signed between the service providers and the satellite operators who give the capacities available, it's back to back. So those guys cannot sign a contract with us which is not in line with what they get committed to with the satellite operators. From here is the point. So here we need to talk about who the satellite operators can secure our presence and provide us the solution where they cannot stop our services, and we go directly with them. It's not an easy process anyway. Yeah,
we need to work on it.
Yes. But it's one of the yes, right. It's one of the options. Yes.
Ben, please.
Yeah, I just had a question for Lorna about...
to whom?
For Lorna. I was interested by the reading with references to what's happened in Ireland historically. And obviously, for example, in the time when there was the issues to do with censoring Sinn Féin voices, we were living in a different technological era. But I was wondering whether you thought there might be some sort of principles or general approaches for bypassing or subverting those kinds of acts of state censorship that could be applicable in a different technological era that we're in now.
I think actually the test case is likely to come in the context of the Russian situation, because there is, of course, a channel that broadcasts to the UK, which has a particular relationship with the Russian government, and that's going to be interesting. And I think that's because of the legal situation, because of the ability to challenge. It's going to potentially open up a space whereby different lessons can be learned and different opportunities potentially opened up. I suppose we'll see. It might not happen, things might calm down. They might go for Chelsea Football Club instead, I don't know. Trying to pull principles out of what happened in the situation between Ireland and the UK, I think, loath to do. Probably the main principle that was established was what constitutes torture rather than ill treatment, which is probably one of the most negative principles to have come out of it, because it basically created an allowable level of mistreatment in the world, and that was directly related to the situation in Northern Ireland. And what's happened, what's happened since, there's continuing problems. If anyone knows about the situation of the Boston tapes, which was an audio history recording with Republicans, which was ultimately not shielded in the way that the people who did the interviews thought it would be. It was done in relationship with Boston University, and some of those tapes have now been revealed. They weren't supposed to be revealed until the people involved had died, and it's a big issue at the moment in the UK, in Northern Ireland, because it's drawn in questions about Gerry Adams' past. So yeah, I think it's difficult to draw any kind of principles out of that. I think that's the big difficulty, and the references earlier about, you know, the UK's great position in the world, but then when you start looking at the history of the UK in relation to this issue, you know, the death on the Rock and the death of Thames Television, there's so many negative examples that you can draw out that effectively undermine the ability of the UK to make an effective argument, and the Irish state is in a much better situation. You know, I think in most of these things, the US is generally the example that you can go to because of the far greater principle to openness and lack of control over the media. But then you actually look at what most people watch in the US, and, you know, yes, people are free to watch what they want, but unfortunately too many of them watch Fox News. So yeah, it's always problematic trying to find good examples around the world that you can use in argument, because, you know, people in repressive countries often justify what they're doing based on the negative actions of countries over here.
Yes, Alistair.
What would be the role of GPS satellites? Because I understand that is a single network that's run by, I think, by the Americans and possibly NATO. I presume that they've, because it's quite a vulnerable system, I presume they've protected it very well. So is there anything we could learn from that? And going a step further, could it be a form of sanction? Is it possible to deny a country access to the GPS satellites? Is it possible to do it with that accuracy, from what you know about satellites?
Actually, I didn't understand the point, the link between GPS and commercial satellites. You want to...
Well, I think my understanding from what I've read about GPS satellites is that they have a much more heightened levels of protection. The technology that they're using.
This is what I was talking about, the commercial, the military. I mean, actually, what they are using highly technically sophisticated technical technologies, I mean, on the board. But we need to keep in mind, highly technical solutions mean more costly for the commercial broadcasters. Even for Al Jazeera, even if we are a big broadcaster, but still it's costly. Because the technology of isolating the interferer is, if you have this country and you are covering legitimately this area, then there is one guy here interfering. Simply you can make some adjustments in the board of satellites where you can isolate him like an infection, like what's happening in the human being body. So you take him out, so that the footprint will be reshaped, so you take this guy out. When you take this guy out, he can continue interference as much he wants. He will not impact anybody. This technology is expensive, because doing reshaping will lose some resources valuable on the satellite, was available to everyone to use. But now after this reshaping, you will lose it. So this makes the cost of such solutions expensive. This military called phased array technologies. It's existing. We can use it, as I said, for some premium channels.
Is it possible to appeal to the owners or developers of that technology, or say the American government or the United Nations, to help subsidize that technology to make it available to networks, especially small networks?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. But even you can share the bandwidth. I mean, there is also technologies where different size broadcasters, they can join together and share that valuable asset, expensive asset, through intelligent multiplexing or aggregation of the content together in one pipe to make it good quality, and still you have more channels on board than 12 or 13. So even the broadcasting technology is evolving. We talk now about 10, 12 channels to be squeezed in one pipe, but still work underway to squeeze more channels in this pipe. So from here is I think the quick win of this anti-jamming.
We just have one more question and then we close. Any other questions?
There's one point Alison brought up about the human rights. You mentioned something about human rights organizations. From our experience, I remember that when we were removed from Nilesat, many human rights organizations sympathized with us, actually, because we informed them about it, and they issued statements. So we need also to involve them with us, probably. Maybe we should have invited some of them, because that's a matter of concern to them. It's a question of a human right. Mm-hmm. So they do, from experience, they do get involved if we allow them or if we involve them.